Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone, and welcome to this next episode of The Rolling Stone. And boy, oh boy, we are going to be starting off on a little bit of a different foot because this first story is actually going to be something personal, okay? Last year, almost a year ago, when I saw Michael Knowles get attacked at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. This is kind of like that, although not as dramatic, because I served my first sentence in Twitter jail. As of this recording, yes. I'm going to break a rule here, because I usually don't say when I record these videos, because, of course, you're watching them whenever I post them on my channel, and but of course, I'm not actually doing it right then and there. I try to create the illusion, but you guys are smart enough and you know that that's not exactly happening. So I'm actually recording this video on Thursday, January 30th. Okay? And yeah, today was the first time that I actually served a sentence in Twitter jail. I'm not going to go into all of the details. Suffice it to say, the long and the short of it is that I committed the horrible crime of misgendering someone. I used a masculine singular pronoun to describe a biological man who believes and presents himself as a woman. That was it. And for that tweet was reported, and Twitter came down on me like a ton of bricks and said, you must either delete that tweet in order to get back on the platform. Now, I'm saying this and I'm telling this story, okay? Not exactly so that I can go through the old, oh, woe is me routine or anything else, okay? Not to say again, that conservative voices are being blocked on social media. I mean, yeah, we know about all this. We know about all this. But there is an important point to be made here, okay? Because this shows in two ways the totalitarian nature that we face with the trans ideology specifically, but more broadly, just the sexual revolution itself. The trans ideology movement, the trans agenda, okay, that has really been going pedal to the metal since 2014. That is just the latest blossoming of the sexual revolution, which really, exploded in the 60s, but which really started in 1936 when the psychiatrist William Reich wrote a book called The Sexual Revolution. Okay? That's really what this is, the totalitarianism of the sexual revolution, and specifically the trans ideology. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you watched Tuesday's video, okay, the video that I just posted this last Tuesday here on the channel, I mentioned the Polish philosopher Leszek Kolakowski. And Kolakowski, he differentiated between regular run-of-the-mill tyranny and totalitarianism. He said, yes, while tyranny, despotism has actually revealed itself in many times in many places in the world, it usually was not what we might say interpersonal, in the sense that the despot, he was content to rule your land, to own your land, to own your labor, etc., etc., right? But he didn't try to command your soul. I think one good example of this would be Louis XIV and Louis XV in France, okay, in the 17th and 18th centuries. They were they were despots, okay? Louis XIV, Louis XV were despots. They basically owned everything in France. Their word was law. Yeah, there were a couple of conventions and privileges, because France at that time had a system of privileges, I'm not going to go into that right now, that you had to maneuver, but once you could get around those things, basically whatever you said went. Plus, you have the divine rights of kings. Basically, the idea was that God tapped you to be king, okay? So they were unquestionably despots, but they weren't totalitarians because honestly, if you were a poor person, living in Orleans or in Calais, or heck, even if you were living in Paris yourself, right? Paris itself, if you didn't break like any major laws, okay? If you basically just lived your own life, paid your taxes on time, then the mechanisms of the government, of the king, was going to leave you alone, okay? They didn't really care about you if you weren't trying to cause trouble. Now, compare that with the Bolshevik revolution in Russia, right? The Bolsheviks were different because they weren't just despots. They didn't just want to own the land, own the labor, and have their word be law. Their goal, the Bolshevik goal, was to own your mind and your soul. Okay? That was the end goal of communism in the Soviet Union. And that's why Kolakowski says that communism is actually an example of totalitarianism, where everything must become simply an atom to, the ruling system, whether that's communism, Nazism, etc., etc. You must become an appendage of the ruling system and the ruling ideology. It has to own your mind. It has to own your soul. You have to click your heels together and say, sir, yes, sir, when the powers that be say 2 + 2 = 5 or equals 10. Okay? That's the difference between despotism and totalitarianism. So the reason why this trans ideology is totalitarian, okay, and why the sexual revolution is totalitarian, is because it follows the same principle. If you don't think, for example, that drag queens stripping for 7 and 8-year-olds in a local library is the best thing, you're the bigot, you're the hater, you have to be punished. If you don't think that preschoolers in New York City should be learning about gender ideology, because no 3-year-old should be learning anything at all about sex, right? You're the bigot, you're the hater, you're the enemy, you have to be punished. If you believe, for example, that a 1-year-old can give a pre-communicative message about gender simply by the way he waves around a onesie, which is actually what some psychologists have argued, then you're the hater, you're the bigot, you're the enemy, you're the one who's going to be punished. Okay? That is the ideology. You stray from that script. You put one toe out of line, and you are going to be punished because there can be no dissent. The thing about totalitarianism is that no one can slip through the cracks, right? Everyone has to consent. Everyone has to be injected with the ideology and be faithful to the ideology, because one person who dissents can set the whole structure tumbling down. He can get people to start thinking, right? Whether he just doesn't obey, whether he starts asking questions, whether he speaks the truth. A genuine case of speaking truth to power, right? People who dissent are dangerous. Therefore, no one can be allowed to dissent, okay? And that's really what my little stint in Twitter jail showed. Because I'm going to lay it down on the line, guys. Here's the thing. We've been inundated for several years now with stories of people on the right being silenced, being deplatformed, being banned, from social media sites, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, whatever, right? It's gotten to the point where we're kind of immune to it. We just kind of shrug our shoulders now, shake our heads or our fist, but we generally accept it. Like, that's just the way the things are. But when we're reading about those stories, when people like you and me, when we're reading those stories, we have a tendency, I believe, to intellectualize them in a sense. And what I mean by that is that we understand that it's happening, we understand the gravitas of what's happening, but it never really hits us that it can happen personally to us, right? Because we're just normal people going about our day, whatever that day is. We think of people, they're going to go after someone like James Woods, who was thrown into Twitter jail several times before he just walked away from the platform. I want to say that was last year in 2019, when he basically called Twitter's bluff and said, you guys aren't a free speech platform. You say that you're a free speech platform, but you're not. I'm leaving. Ciao, baby. We expect them to come for people like that, people who have a large following on social media, people who are movers and shakers in politics and in the culture, okay? We don't expect them to come after common, ordinary people, okay? I'll just lay it right on the line. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, or if you're subscribed here, on my channel, or if you've come across my channel, you know that I don't have, a very big following on any of those platforms. I'm not complaining about that, right? I'm just stating it as a fact, right? My sphere of influence on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter is minuscule, right? Tiny. I'm not even a little fish, right? I'm like a little minnow. And I'm betting that a lot of people are in that same situation, right? We don't have hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter, right? We don't have 12, we don't have 400, and we don't have 400,000 subscribers on YouTube or anything like that. You know what? We have a very modest followings. And so we tend to think that they're not going to come for us, right? We're kind of protected by our smallness, which gives us a little bit of anonymity, right? When Taylor Swift or Donald Trump or Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro tweets something, posts a video, puts something out on Instagram, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people see it in some fashion or another, right? And we think those are the people that the totalitarians are going to come after. But no, my friends, okay? If they came after a little minnow like me, okay? And I'm not saying that snarky, I'm not saying that, in an ironic sense. I'm just stating that as a fact, right? If they came after a little minnow like me, then they will come after you as well, because there can be no dissent, okay? Really, the only thing that is going to determine whether you eventually run afoul of the thought police or not is where you draw the line. Where do you personally draw the line? Do you think that transgenderism is wrong-headed on the face of it, that a man cannot become a woman no matter how much he tries to look and behave like a woman, and vice versa? Or is that really not a problem for you? But you think that maybe drag queens entertaining, 8-year-olds, maybe that's not the best thing in the world, right? Wherever you draw the line, however, sooner or later, the powers that be are going to come after you. That is the inevitable result of totalitarianism, okay? It's not necessarily about secret police, actual physical police, busting down doors, causing people to disappear in the middle of the night. That can definitely be part of it. We saw it in the Soviet Union. We saw it in Cuba. We see it in Iran today. We see it in North Korea. But it doesn't have to be like that, because all totalitarianism has to do is honestly simply punish people by excommunicating them from polite society, right? Pushing them out of the public sphere, whether that is physically or whether it's digitally by, banning you from popular platforms like Twitter and Facebook, which have now become part of the public sphere because they have become, parts of how we communicate regularly on a day-to-day basis with each other and how we interact with the world. But that is the real lesson that I want you guys to take from my little story, okay? That they will come after you. When people say that they're coming after you, okay? They are not just trying to be clickbaity. They are not fear-mongering. They're not overgeneralizing and talking about you, plural, as in, some people in their audience are going to be in trouble. No, they are talking about you in particular. And that's what I am saying. You definitely, unless you sign up for the entire ideology, lock, stock, and barrel, and on top of that, you sign up for every permutation and every change of the ideology. If you can keep up abreast with it, keep up with it, and just blindly follow it wherever it goes and believe whatever it says, that's the only way that you're going to be safe. Okay? But then, of course, that leads to the question, is that sort of safety worth it? Is it worth actually, betraying what you really believe, betraying your conscience, and what you know to be true and what you know to be good? But that is pretty much what I have to say. You know what? If they're going to come after me, if they threw me into Twitter jail, they're going to come after all of you guys too. It just depends on where you draw that line, okay? And if you're wondering, yes, I am back on Twitter. I had to delete my egregious thought crime. And then, let me think here, after 14 hours, pretty much after 14 hours, after I was banned, the benevolent gods of Twitter let me back on. Okay? But there was the thing. There was the price you had to pay. You had to delete that thought crime, right? Had to completely delete it. It had vaporized it. It had never existed. You had never questioned the ideology, which in and of itself is just another way of exerting control. But anyway, that is story number 1 for this week.